All right, so today we're diving into something I think a lot of English learners struggle with. You know that feeling of hesitation when you're trying to speak? Like you want to get the words out, but your brain just freezes up.
Yeah, it's a common experience. And the material you provided for this deep dive is fantastic, including that full podcast transcript all about fluency and confidence.
There's so much good stuff in there. We're going to break it down and hopefully find the best insights.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how the source material tackles that fear head on. You know, the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
There's even a quote that I think a lot of our listeners can relate to.
Uh-oh, what is it?
It says, "What if I say something wrong? What if people laugh at me?"
It's so true, though, right? That fear is so real and can be paralyzing.
You can. But the source material doesn't just dwell on that fear. It actually challenges us to think about why we're so afraid of making mistakes in the first place.
Which is interesting because we don't often think about that.
Right. And it goes a step further by giving this real-life example. They talk about hearing a native English speaker say, "I seen that movie."
Okay, and?
Grammatically, it's incorrect. But did anyone stop the conversation to correct them? Nope.
It's a great point because it really shows that fluency, being able to get your message across, is often more important than perfect grammar, especially in casual conversations.
Exactly. That's where the real power of communication lies. In connection, not perfection. And when we focus too much on avoiding mistakes, we actually end up overthinking every word.
Yeah, and that's when we miss out on that natural flow of conversation.
Exactly.
It's like, imagine if we applied that level of scrutiny to speaking in our native languages.
Right.
We'd never get a word out.
Exactly. The beauty of fluency is that it feels effortless. You know, thoughts just flow, and the source material emphasizes that we should aim for that same feeling when speaking English.
It's so true. I never thought about it like that before.
Such a key insight. And speaking of insights, I'm curious to explore some of the techniques the source material recommends for overcoming this fear of making mistakes and building fluency. What do you think?
I think let's do it because they have some really interesting strategies that go beyond the typical advice. And I think this is where things get really practical for our listeners. Okay, so one of the first things the source material really pushes is this idea, focus on communication, not perfection.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like a mantra for anyone who tends to overthink when they're trying to speak English.
I see what you mean. It's like shifting the perspective from, eliminating errors to effectively getting your thoughts across.
Right, and connecting with the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
They even asked this question, which I thought was kind of thought-provoking. Would you rather deliver a perfectly crafted sentence after a 10-second delay or a natural, slightly imperfect sentence immediately?
Well, in a real conversation, who wants to wait 10 seconds for a grammatically perfect response?
Yeah, exactly.
Real-life communication requires that we can be spontaneous. And overthinking well, it kind of kills that flow.
For sure, for sure. And you know that 5-second rule that we were talking about earlier? Well, the source material really digs into why that technique can be so effective.
Yeah. It's not just a challenge. It's about training your brain to think in English.
Right.
Because when you only give yourself 5 seconds to respond, you don't have time to translate in your head or overthink the grammar.
Oh, so you're forced to just tap into what you know.
Exactly. You have to access your vocabulary and construct sentences on the fly.
It's like you bypass the translation process in your head and just speak.
And over time, that could lead to, more natural and fluent speech.
For sure.
The source also talks about this technique called speak first, correct later. Have you ever found yourself mentally rehearsing a sentence before actually saying it out loud?
Oh my God, all the time. Like I'm trying to get it absolutely perfect before I even open my mouth. But then I end up losing my train of thought or just missing my opportunity to contribute to the conversation.
Right, and that's what this technique is trying to address. It's encouraging us to break free from that perfectionist mindset and just start speaking.
If you make a mistake, you can always self-correct after.
Or clarify later.
Yeah. The key is to keep that conversation flowing.
Exactly. It's about embracing those imperfections.
Yeah.
And using them as opportunities to learn and grow. And, the source material doesn't stop at these core techniques. They also include some really fun exercises.
Ooh, fun. Like what?
Well, they talk about the 1-minute challenge, for example.
Okay, the 1-minute challenge?
It's about picking any topic, and you have to talk about it for a whole minute, nonstop.
And it doesn't matter if your sentences are grammatically perfect?
The goal is just to keep the words flowing.
Wow. That sounds hard.
It can be,
Yeah.
But it's a great way to push yourself beyond your comfort zone and, develop that mental agility you need for fluent conversation.
Okay, I like it.
And the best part is you can do it anywhere, anytime.
Speaking of doing it right here, right now, I think it's time to put you on the spot. Are you up for a 1-minute challenge?
Ooh. Sure.
Right. The topic is the last book you read, and go.
Okay. The last book I read was, let me think, Sapiens.
Sapiens.
Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. It's a really fascinating exploration of human history, from our early evolutionary origins to the present day. And the book tackles some really big questions, like what makes us human, how did we become the dominant species on Earth, and what does the future hold for humankind? I mean, he just weaves together all these insights from biology, anthropology, history, and philosophy. I was constantly highlighting passages and wanting to talk about it with everyone I knew. It really makes you think, and it's definitely a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
And stop. You did it. You kept going for the whole minute. That was really impressive, and you even managed to work in some fancy vocabulary there.
Thanks. I have to admit, that was actually kind of fun. It's a great way to warm up your brain and get those English juices flowing.
Yeah, it shows how these exercises can be both effective and fun. Now, the source material doesn't just stop at the 1-minute challenge. They also highlight the power of shadowing.
Yeah, shadowing. It's all about mimicking a native speaker.
Mimicking? Like how?
Their pronunciation, their rhythm, intonation, even their body language, if you can.
So it's like having a personal language coach right there with you.
Exactly.
And I love that there's so many resources you can use for this, like podcasts, YouTube videos, movies.
Anything you get your hands on.
You can basically turn any English content into a shadowing exercise.
It's fantastic for absorbing the nuances of spoken English.
For sure. Okay, one more exercise that the source material talks about is the tell a story game. So this is about choosing a simple story and retelling it in English. And again, the focus isn't on being grammatically perfect, but on expressing yourself in a way that's clear and engaging.
Yeah, because stories are such a powerful way to connect with others.
Right.
And this exercise helps you develop the skills you need to tell those stories in English.
Awesome.
And you can start with familiar tales like childhood favorites or historical events.
And then work your way up.
Exactly. To more complex narratives.
It's a great way to practice using, different tenses and descriptive language and just working on those storytelling techniques.
It's a nice reminder that language learning doesn't have to be all about textbooks and grammar rules.
Right.
Sometimes the best way to learn is just have fun and let those creative juices flow.
It's so cool to learn about all these techniques and stuff, but it's even more inspiring to see how they actually work in real life,
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about it in theory, but to see that people are using these techniques, actually becoming fluent and transforming their lives.
Yeah.
It's really motivating for those of us who are still on that journey.
Totally. And the source material includes all these inspiring stories of people who actually did overcome their hesitation and found their voice in English. Like one story that really stuck with me was about this woman, Maria. She had a really good grasp of English grammar, but she was so shy, afraid of making mistakes that she could barely speak.
Oh yeah, Maria's story. She had the knowledge, but she wasn't applying it. Like a car without an engine. You have all the parts, but you're not going to get anywhere unless you turn the key and start driving.
Exactly. And the advice she got was so simple. Speak first, think later.
Basically, embrace the imperfections and just get those words out.
Focus on communication rather than accuracy.
Yeah, and it's about breaking free from that overthinking and self-doubt.
So what happened?
Well, that's exactly what she did. She started doing those daily speaking challenges, just pushing herself little by little.
So she kept expanding her comfort zone.
Exactly. And within a month, her confidence soared. She wasn't held back by that fear of making mistakes anymore.
I mean, it's amazing how those small, consistent actions can lead to such big changes.
It's like they say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
And sometimes that first step is the hardest one to take.
It is, but once you do, the momentum builds.
Okay, so there's another story that I found really inspiring. It was about this guy, Jack, who moved to Canada with very basic English.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And instead of just, taking formal classes, he just dove headfirst into daily conversation, forcing himself to learn on the fly.
Oh, wow. That's the power of immersion, right?
Yeah.
Turning those everyday interactions into learning opportunities.
He didn't wait for that perfect moment or perfect grammar. He just jumped in.
I love that. It reminds me of that saying, The best way to learn to swim is to jump in the water. You can study all the techniques, but until you feel the water and start moving, you're not really learning.
Exactly. And his learning by doing approach led him to fluency. I mean, way faster than he could have imagined.
It really shows that the best classroom is the real world sometimes.
It is. Okay, so as we're wrapping up this deep dive into fluency and confidence building, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think first and foremost, action is key.
Right.
Don't wait for the perfect moment to speak. Just start talking.
Start talking.
And practice over perfection.
Because fluency isn't about eliminating every error.
It's about communicating your ideas.
And engaging in conversations.
Yeah. And remember, confidence grows with every word you speak. The more you practice, the more self-assured you'll become.
That's a good one.
And most importantly, have fun.
Yes.
Embrace the learning process. Enjoy the journey.
It's all about the journey. And now I want to turn it over to you, our listener. What resonated with you most from this deep dive?
Yeah. Which technique or story really sparked your interest?
We encourage you to choose one action step, something you can try in your very next English conversation.
Maybe it's that 5-second rule, or the 1-minute challenge, or maybe just reminding yourself to speak first, correct later.
What small step can you take today to break free from hesitation and start speaking with more confidence? We'd love to hear about your journey, so feel free to share your experiences with us.
Absolutely.
Until then, happy speaking.